You gorgeous, gorgeous people of the internet. Welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Anna. We talk about books here and I like to think that we have a pretty good time. Today I am doing a little bit of a follow-up video, a sequel, segundo, sort of a video to follow in the footsteps of another video that I did about 2 weeks ago, ranking all of the classics that I've read. I had one solitary comment ask for the nonfiction books that I've read, and I said, yeah, I'm gonna do that. We're gonna be ranking the nonfiction that I've read. I think I'm well-rounded in the books that I choose. Maybe not. Towards the top of the list, you'll notice I'm obviously a little bit partial to some subjects more than others, but I like to think I've reached into many different valleys of life and people. Anyway, I have 71 books here. And as I did the disclaimer in the last video, I haven't read every nonfiction book. I know that there's millions of books, maybe not millions, but thousands of books that I should read. So these are just the books that I have read. And what I would also like to say is a disclaimer, major disclaimer alert, is that these are nonfiction, these are true stories. So who am I to rank somebody's true recounting of a situation? I have absolutely no reason to be the person to tell you to read this or not read this. This is just my opinions. Majority of these books were pretty damn good. So that's just my little disclaimer. Anyway, 71 books. Let me get right into it. Number 71 is Uncanny Valley. This is probably one of the only ones that really just kind of grinded my gears a little bit. Just because it was advertised so heavily as an amazing book. It was like one of the best books of the year. Everybody was talking about it. And I was like, all right, we're about to go into a situation of love. We're about to fully embrace this book about Silicon Valley. It felt like a lot of pointing at fingers and really no looking in the mirror sort of thing. Not really a favorite book. Really, really overhyped, I thought. Nothing majorly astounding in that book to make me feel like it should have received the insane praise that it did. So that was just much more of like a confusion. A major confusion for me. So yeah, I guess I didn't like that one. And to kind of piggyback off of that, I have Between the Lines. And this book has so much potential. The whole infrastructure of this book just screams something that I should love, we all should love. Uli Buter-Cohen, who is the founder of what is this, like Subway Stories or something? I forget what her Instagram is called. Her whole idea, her whole business model was to go up to people on the New York City subway, ask them what they're reading, and then just have a very open conversation with them. Obviously, it would lead to a lot more, and that's fantastic. That's such a great way to get to know people. That's the beauty of New York City. But this book just feels like it was totally primed. It was manicured. It was made to illuminate stories about famous people. There was like a couple of random writers in there. There was actors, there was rock stars, and just the whole idea of this serendipitous encounter of liking what somebody's reading and then getting to know them absolutely was not in that book at all. And it was all just these very curated photographs taken and then just being like, oh, and I happened to meet the mayor in the subway and he didn't have any security around him, and I asked him what his favorite book was. There was a fly that just went by. Also, that fly was circling around and it knows that that book was that. I have Butts, a backstory. I read this year, and this was given to me by the publisher, a fantastic publishing company, but this book just wasn't for me. I think Butts, the selling point of this book, having its title be Butts, having a peach prominently on the cover, is what makes this a really, really successful seller. Also just butts in general. I mean, a book about butts. Who's not gonna at least be slightly inclined to pick that up? Radke was coming at it from so many different angles. She had this historical element that was really, really strong and provided so many valid points. And then she kind of just pivoted much more into cultural opinion pieces about people that we all basically know as a society. And we all can kind of say, yeah, I don't agree with what that person's doing, XYZ. So it just didn't really feel like it was augmenting any sort of argument that she was already making. So it just felt like, I don't know, a really kind of poorly put together book, and just kind of was riding on the tails of having its title be butts. I Thought My Father Was God. This is all NPR short stories put into one novel. I love NPR short stories, love the Moth Radio Hour, any sort of live storytelling show I'm gonna love. This just, I don't know, it just felt a little bit short. The stories didn't really stand out. There was a couple standalone stories for me, but the whole book is a mass, just didn't really work. It was a little disjointed. It felt like she was wobbling. She was wobbling. Disobey by Frederic Gros. I have to say it. I picked this up because I read another book of his, which you might see on the list. This just was a little bit boring for me. It's a philosophy book, so it's hit or miss with philosophy for me. I really have to be into it. Unfortunately, I wasn't crazy about this. This is all about disobedience. Obviously, disobey is in the title. The mentality behind disobedience, and there's a lot of really strong points in this. I could have used it as a pillow. I fell asleep a little bit. Book of Delights. I know this is a hot take. I know it's a hot take. I know it's a hot take. I know it's a hot take. Sorry. This book just was a little bit too like earthy for me, you know? The Fran Lebowitz reader. Breaks my heart. Really breaks my heart, because I feel like Fran Lebowitz, so intelligent, so snarky, such like a little detective with words, you know? Attack. So smart. This book, to me, I would have loved it if I lived in New York in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s even, and there was this whole encyclopedia of how to live your life, how to exchange these customs of New York City. And now reading it, it just doesn't really speak to me that way. I gave this to one of my friend's boyfriends when they were moving out of the city. They've since returned because they missed it too much, but I gave this to them as a gift, and I said, keep this as a little reminder of what New York has. And I think that is what this book is good for. Girl Interrupted. I think the movie does it better. Sorry, Winona. The Innovators by Walter Isaacson. All about the history of technology, all of these little moving parts and the people that implemented them into this big machine. I really enjoyed one of the beginning chapters, learning about Ada Lovelace, who is the daughter of Lord Byron, and how she was one of the first coders, kind of seeing this prominent woman in this otherwise kind of like male-dominated field. I thought that was really interesting. I like to see the little intricacies of all of these people who had these major roles in technology and who have maintained their positions, then who have kind of faded out. Really interesting. Just a lot of stuff went over my head. Not that smart. Still a good book, just not it for mama. I Am by Maggie O'Farrell. Just read this. This is all of her close encounters with dying. I got a little bit bored. Oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. I just did. I'm sorry. Unicorn. This I listened to as an audiobook when I was in Ukraine. I would spend beautiful mornings walking and listening to this. And this is a drag queen's memoir, kind of the merging of a history to a present and making it all come together. Really kind of bright writing. I remember enjoying the beginning much more than the end. Yeah, a good book. You know, not like a super standout for me, but I still enjoyed the experience. Wool Gathering by Patti Smith. You're gonna notice that there's gonna be a couple of old Patties on here because I love me some Patricia Smith. This book just, I can't really tell you what this is about. I've read so many of her books, especially her small ones, and I'm like, what did I read? I know that I loved it. I know that it was beautiful. I know that it was, you know, so stunning, so moving, had a profound experience, cried, and, you know, evaluated my life, but I can't tell you what it was about. Tacky by Rex King. This was definitely sold to me as a book that was all about the history of tackiness and kind of how it's become prominent in mainstream culture. And it's definitely much more of a memoir about King's life and the tacky partners to these memories that she has, which is endearing, which is super sweet, but I just don't know King as an individual enough to really desire that emphasis. Still fun book. I gave this to a friend. If you're of a certain age group and you appreciate the tacky pillars that she's talking about, you would love it. Creed. I'm 6 feet from the edge and I'm thinking. Tom Wolfe, Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. I love Ken Kesey, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't want to spoil it, but that ranked pretty high on my last list. It sure did. This book it was a lot about drugs. It was a lot about the consumption of drugs. It was a lot about the chaos of drugs. And, after a while you read a lot about drugs and it's like, okay, I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it. I know that you guys are tripping balls. Three Women by Lisa Taddeo. This was the biggest book that year. Everybody was talking about it. This is all about three women's journeys with sexuality. I only remember the one girl having an affair with her teacher, which I wouldn't exactly say is a journey. I would say it's much more of a, significantly horrible event. An Unquiet Mind. It's all about a woman battling bipolar disorder and kind of the movements, what makes this illness take over her. And I liked this. I just felt like it lost its footing a little bit. I will say that there was a really, really illuminating chapter about her manic spending, which is something that I wasn't particularly aware of. I always think about that for some reason. It's just a part of that book that I always think about, and for that, I'm thankful. 3 Cups of Deceit by Jon Krakauer. I listened to this on my road trip in Montana. This is all about the deceit of the guy who wrote 3 Cups of Tea, which was a worldwide bestseller. The 3 Cups of Tea is all about how he opened up these schools for these children in these countries to read and how it didn't actually happen. And Jon Krakauer's investigative journalism shines a light onto that, and he's scathing and he's pissed and he's Jon Krakauer at his finest, but not my favorite book of his. Underground by Murakami. I just read this and it was almost too good of investigative journalism, which is horrible to say because this is real people's testimonials about a very, very real gas attack that happened in Tokyo in the 90s. And it was so many different angles of the story that it just merged in together, where I think it would have almost been better to just have it be very selective while still giving a voice to people. It was just almost too thorough. So Sad Today by Melissa Broder. This is her personal essays and kind of what made her boom onto the scene. She had a Twitter account called So Sad Today, and it was anonymous for a long time, and so many people were giggling their little booties off. That was kind of the launching pad for her career. So Sad Today is just like the elongated version of that, just kind of these musings, these ramblings that she has. And I remember there's some freakiness going on in there. Melissa B is a wild one, and that's why I love her. I think she's crazy, and I think she shows this glamness while still being totally wild, and it's unsuspecting, and that's what I appreciate about her, because I think she's my kind of gal. But this book wasn't a major favorite of mine. I still read it in a day, so what can I say? How We Die, all about particular instances of death, and Newland, who is the author, is in the medical field, and he takes these really intricate deep dives into illnesses, heart attacks, aneurysms, things like that, and gives specific cases, and then just kind of the weavings in of how that happened, how it can be prevented, and what the future of that may hold. Interesting, but again, something really, really scientific. A lot of it went over my head. That's on me, not on the book. It's like a major bestseller, so I don't mean anything in the scheme of where that book lies in history. Then we have In the Garden of the Beasts I believe that's exactly the full name, by Eric Larson. You're going to notice some Eric Larson in here. I love me some Eric. That was my shoe. I love Eric Larson. I think he does history really well, and he makes it engaging and fun. What the is that bug? Oh no, I don't like that. What was that? A centipede? Thanks, Oleg.
That's terrible looking.
Anyway, before I was rudely interrupted by something with 1,000 legs. In the Garden of the Beast, Eric Larson. This is all about the American ambassador to Germany during the time of the Nazi regime coming to kind of rise. I learned so much from it. Enjoyed my experience with it, but it's not my favorite Larson by any means. Not my favorite. Homo Deus. This is the sequel to Homo Sapiens, which blew up everywhere as well. I think that was a major 2019 or 2018 book. This second book didn't really have the impact as much as Homo Sapiens did, and I think there might be a reason for that. But this was good. I definitely remember enjoying this quite a bit. I read this fervently on the subway. Then we have, what is that book called? In the Eye of the Wild. This book is about a woman being attacked by a bear in rural Siberia. She survives, she lives to tell the tale, and this is the story of that. I'm gonna be completely honest with this. This is a really lyrical book. This is a book that just takes you on a journey. It's like this big. It's this big. It's a little baby sliver. And I was so excited about this book because I was like, Bear Attack? The Revenant didn't do it right. She focuses a lot on the spirituality of the place and the spirituality of the experience, which I think is an amazing way to grapple with what happened, and I think so integral to embodying that and trying to recover from that. But there's really not much about the bear attack in general, which selfishly, that is what I want to read about. Dope Sick. This is all about the opioid epidemic and how it is becoming so rampant in the United States that it's really unpredictable where it'll go next. Yeah, good book. Enjoyed it. Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. This is all about Louis Zamperini, who is a Olympic hopeful or Olympic contestant who enlisted in the war effort during World War II, and the epic survival story, not only surviving on a boat, stranded in the seas for, I think, 40 days or something like that, but also surviving a prisoner of war camp. Profound story, obviously moving. Horrible movie rendition was done. Sorry, Angelina Jolie, I do like you a lot, but that movie wasn't it. Lost Girls by Robert Kolker. This book is really, really pertinent to what is going on now. If you don't know what this book is about the Long Island serial killer who allegedly has been named this past week, really taking over the news in the United States. Robert Kolker does a whole novel about the girls. He does talk about the girls in a way that is kind of not necessarily in the best light, but I do think that he does a really proper job of showing a fully linear story. And now we know it's somebody who is from that area. It's really creepy. I suggest you check out about that murder anyway, because it's very ongoing. Stolen Lives. Talked about this book before. It's about a family that was imprisoned for their father's political affiliation, and they were imprisoned for 20 years in a desert jail. They did manage to escape, and this is all about their survival story. Fantastic book, unbelievable story, and just unlike anything you'll read, really. Dog Flowers. I read this past year. This is a memoir. This is all about family and kind of trying to break the cycles of addiction and break the cycles of dependence. I liked this. I think that this was a debut. Kind of felt more like a podcast. I listened to it, so it obviously felt like a podcast, but I think that it read pretty rapidly, and I think seeing somebody's success is a nice thing. Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. Frank McCourt does a fantastic job of showing you a life that is stuck in this little bubble of youth, and kind of how these formative years take us on a journey, and we really hold them with us forever. Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. JK, he's on the list again. Krakauer's most famous novel, it's all about Christopher McCandless, who went completely rogue and lived off the land and ultimately, spoiler alert, though I think it's a very open spoiler, ended up dying in the Alaskan wilderness. And just kind of this look into these people who want to go off the grid and, you know, completely go off the grid. It's not specific to McCandless's story. There are other stories kind of interspersed as well, but McCandless is the main story throughout it. I love a good outdoors book, as you will notice. So let's carry on. Joan Didion, My Year of Magical Thinking. Great book on grief. Really, really great book on grief. I read this at the wrong time. I read this in the beautiful summer months when absolutely nothing was bothering me. So I don't think that I had any sort of relationship to what she was talking about, thankfully. But this is an amazing book on grief and losing people in such rapid succession and in such unpredictable manners that you have no idea how to even begin to wrap your mind around it. Really great. Didion's a fantastic writer. Under the Banner of Heaven by Jon Krakauer. Really didn't skip a beat with the JKs on here. Great look into fundamentalist Mormon religion and this famous murder that kind of opened up the lid and aided in investigating what has been going on in this very, very fundamentalist sect of the religion. And great, really great investigative journalism. Pretty dense in some parts again, but really good. Really like that. Yeure the Monkey by Patti Smith. Is this nonfiction? I think so. This is a lot about mourning the life of someone who you knew in your youth. She talks a lot about Sam Shepard, who is also a writer. I haven't read any of things, but he's also an actor as well. This is like a weird play on structure. She gets into like these very imaginative situations. Rogues by that guy. You know who he is. He's done a lot of books. I guess that this was just all a compilation of his stories that he had previously written. They put it all into one and said, book. Playing with the idea of people who live these offbeat lives, these people who have made their own rules. Some of them are illegal, some are not. Some are just people who have created their own footpaths and absolutely ran on them. So I thought that was really interesting, though. Some stories were obviously stronger than others. Some were complete duds. Some I snoozed. Others I was upright, attentive, and foaming at the mouth with excitement. So there you go. The Solace of Open Spaces is next. And this is all about Wyoming. And if you know me, you know I love that open air. You know I love a good bison. You know I love a good mountain. I love to know that in the winter, if I don't have four-wheel drive, I'm gonna die. Yeah, this was good. It's all about Wyoming. And moving from a totally metropolitan area to a completely rural life. Among the Flowers by Jamaica Kincaid. This is all about Kincaid's hiking in Nepal. What I think is really interesting about her is that she just took a portion of her interest and was like, I'm gonna write a whole novel on it. She's a huge flower collector. I know that there's a name for that, but it's escaping me now. But she went on this particular trip to study all of these seeds and these growths, and she wrote this novel about it while also pairing her experience with the hike. I loved it. I thought it was great. King Kong Theory by Virginie Despentes. I've talked about this a million times. This is the ultimate, just like, screaming, ripping, punching book. Wild, pulsing. Reading this book. I had a good time with this book, and I like it, so I'll probably read it again. I don't necessarily agree with everything that she talks about in King Kong Theory, but I think that it's a good experience. Joan of Arc, in her words. This was a really interesting book. I just randomly picked this up, and this is all the transcripts of the Joan of Arc trial. It put so much information about Joan of Arc that I didn't know. I mean, we all have an idea of Joan of Arc, right? This youthful girl who came and led, but you don't realize how young she was, how fast everything happened, what the trial looked like, what she was really condemned for. And this was so interesting to read. Something I'm happy that I read. And now I have much more discourse to go off on that subject. The Splendid and the Vial by Erik Larson. He's back on the list. He's back at it again with the white vans. This is all about the Blitz and Churchill and how the English kind of offset this catastrophe and learn to just adhere to these new guidelines of life, and really interesting. This book was a chunky baby, but I found myself absolutely floored with the information that I was learning. Really enjoyed it. Helter Skelter. One of the OGs of crime investigation. This is by Vincent Bugliosi, and he was kind of covering the trial of the Manson murders. Charles Manson, horrible cult figure. Scary. Just scary. Just scary. I read this when I came back from California one of the first times and was just shocked. American Indian Stories by Zitkala Shah. This is kind of similar to Patti Smith, where this is put in as nonfiction, which I think a lot of the stories are. But then some of them are about people who I think she knew, or, you know, maybe loosely had heard the story and then told people's stories. I'm much more interested about Zitkala Shah as a person. I think that she's incredibly impressive. When Breath Becomes Air, I think that this is, again, a really great book for grief, a really great book for understanding things completely out of our control. This is all from the perspective of a neurosurgeon, neuroscientist, the author himself. That's who wrote it. He is diagnosed with cancer, and he just kind of details his ultimate demise. Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. I've said this once about this book, and I'm just going to say it again. I'm so happy that somebody else wrote Steve Jobs' book, because I think if Steve Jobs wrote his own book, it would be a completely just aggrandized version of the book. And I'm fascinated by Steve Jobs. This is a really great biography about somebody, regardless of where your stance is on technology. He is inspirational in his visions. It's inspiring. I liked it. I don't care. I liked it. I don't care. And then we have Changing My Mind by Zadie Smith. This is a collection of all of her not stories. This is nonfiction, Anna. This is all of her essays. Duh. It's all of her essays about people who have impacted her lives. You have celebrities, you have writers, you have people who have kind of created these impressions in her, and how they've forged a way for her to kind of conduct her own life. And some of them were boring, I'll be honest, but a lot of them were really great, and it exposed me to so many different books and ideas on writers, and so many different takes on these famous people, and I really liked it. Cults is a book highlighting very specific cults throughout history. There's nothing like floral about it. He doesn't get into anything with his opinion. It's just straight facts, which I appreciate. And then Seductive Poison is all about the Jonestown massacre. This is written by a former member, somebody who managed to escape. It's a very, very, very harrowing tale. So unbelievable. Definitely do some research, but really, really great. A Piece of Cake by Cupcake Brown, one of the best names ever. This book I read a long time ago, and I want to reread it. This is a memoir from Cupcake Brown, and it's all about growing up in this very, very fractured background, and being able to persevere and end up becoming a success. I liked this book. I read this when I was younger. I read this when I was, I want to say like 19 maybe, and it still stuck out to me. Darkness Visible by William Styron. This is Styron's personal account of dealing with depression. It's a really, really slim book. I still have it on my shelves. And I think at the time when he wrote it, it wasn't as much of a discussed conversation as it is now. And I think that he was just kind of trying to break that stigma of what depression could be, and how somebody as successful as him couldn't even get out of bed, couldn't even eat, couldn't even keep any sort of engagements that he had with people. And I think it's a great book. I just read this, but the Susan Sontag book, what did I just read? Regarding the Pain of Others. This I thought was so fascinating, and I haven't shut up about it. This is all about kind of tragedy photography and tragedy depiction on, our screens, on our life. I mean, this is obviously pre-Instagram, kind of pre-YouTube. Oh my God, this is so fascinating for me. I couldn't put this down. I thought that it was so smart. I thought that it was so well researched. And again, a small novel and so impactful. Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker. This was a runaway. This was a runaway bestseller. Everybody was talking about it like 2 years ago, and I was ready to be part of that crowd. This is all about a family with, I want to say 12 or 10 children, and I believe 6 of the boys were diagnosed with schizophrenia. This is all about tracing the lineage of what caused this in this family, what DNA connected this in this family. Exactly the type of nonfiction that I gravitate towards. Really moving story about something I otherwise maybe wasn't interested in, but now have so much more of a broader understanding. This is a book that's a little funky, and I think about it all the time, and this is why I'm putting it high on this list. A Philosophy of Walking by Frédéric Gros. The guy who wrote, one of the novels I mostly disliked. This is all about philosophers and their relationship to walking. That's about it. Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. It's got to be on there too. It's got to be on there. This is all about the fatal Mount Everest ascent in, I will fact check myself right down here. What's interesting about this is that it goes into so much about the logistics of mountain climbing and why it is people want to climb Everest, kind of the greediness of wanting to climb it, the combative personalities that want to climb it, and just the appreciation that you have to have for the mountain and the whole craft in general. Oh, it's so well done. Krakauer himself was on the mountain, and he was able to ascend, and a portion of the group that he was with unfortunately passed away. Haunting, it's alarming, but it's a really, really great piece of work. Stages. I picked this up on the side of the road, and this is one of those books that has stuck with me for quite a while. This is a kind of mixed media sort of book, but it's definitely nonfiction. This primarily follows a nursing home and the strategies that they use to continue giving life to people who are in this nursing home, this category of people that are kind of left behind. People don't pay attention to older people, and it breaks my heart. Don't forget about old people. My Brother by Jamaica Kincaid. Great book. Really, really great book. This is all about Kincaid's brother, obviously, and his battle with AIDS. Again, kind of the stigma that was surrounding that, and just the absolute denial that her brother was in, and the denial that the family was in with kind of having to learn to embrace the situation at hand. A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. All about the Appalachian Trail. A funny little take on the Appalachian Trail. Bill Bryson is a funny guy, and one of my dreams in life is to hike the Appalachian Trail. I'm deep in Appalachian Trail YouTube. There's a couple of people that I follow. I'm following their journey, and I'm right there with you, sister. I'm right there with you. The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson. This book, again, was huge when it came out. The most recognizable cover, I would say, of like the last 15 years. This is all about Nelson's partner and Nelson's own life and sexuality and identity, and kind of this rise in being able to be who you want to be and who you need to be. I think what I like most about this novel is the writing. That writing got me into writing. I was inspired to write after reading that, just because it was so like, holy sh**. A Little History of the World by E.H. Gombrich. I read this year after having it on my bookshelf for like 3 years. But now I am intelligent, I am moved, and I am cultured because I know the world. No, this is great. I think this is a great little brush up to have a really linear idea of history and to just kind of have much more of a well-rounded understanding of this building of the world. Just Kids by Patti Smith. This is the Patti Smith for me, and I think it is for a lot of people. This helped me decide to move to New York City. It's helped me decide to forge a path and have family with the friends that I surround myself with. Just, fall in love with whoever that may be and whatever that may be and wherever that may be. And just know that I'm in the right place at the right time and I am where I need to be. That's how it goes, right? Something like that. Tiger Dreams by Jon Krakauer. This is all about mountain climbing. Which is something I myself will never probably do. I'm petrified of heights. I really, really am. This is short stories, so it's much more expansive than just mountain climbing. It's going into a lot of these life-threatening sports, these life-threatening things, and just these extreme ways of living life in the outdoors. And I think he does a great job depicting it, so I love it. Dead Ladies Project. I've talked about this book also before. This is such a travel girly book. This is a travel girly book. All about Jessa Crispin and her journey to travel to these iconic spots that are matched with these iconic figures in her life. These writers, these artists, these theatrical figures who she has looked up to and she's kind of pined to know more about. And it takes her independent travels and then matches them to the stories of these people that she idolizes. And I think it's a really fantastic format. And I sped read through this and I learned so much through this book. And I thought it was just a girly traveling book. A girly having a summer. Dead Wake by Erik Larson. This is a book I think about like once a week. This is all about the sinking of the Lusitania. Every time somebody talks about Titanic, I'm like, but did you know about the Lusitania? Did you know about the Lusitania? This I feel like is a really great read to read. Art, Sex, Music by Cosi Fanny Tutti. For me, this book screams really cool music, really cool background, really cool determination, and just really cool person. If you don't know who Cosi Fanny Tutti is, she was a member of Throbbing Gristle. Hold your water in your mouth. Don't spit it out. That is the actual band name. They were kind of these pioneers of industrial music, and I love electronic music. I love the history of electronic music, and I will jam at any point. But Cosi Fanny Tutti was somebody who I didn't really know that much about, and then I read this book and I knew a lot about her. Also, I think she is in the music video to one of my favorite songs of all time, You Make Me Feel by Sylvester, as one of the gyrating dancers, if you've ever seen it. That's cool. Are we at the 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, that was 10. So now we're at 9. And that is Voices from Chernobyl. This is exactly what the title says, Voices from Chernobyl. This is taking stories about people who survived Chernobyl or people who were directly affected by it, lineages of family that were affected by it. Really difficult book to read. It took me a really, really long time to finish this book, but I do think it's incredibly important. Heavy. This book was suggested to me by a subscriber a long, long time ago. I read it last year. I thought it was fantastic. I think that this is exactly what I want a memoir to be. Somebody who I don't necessarily know about, but whose story I ultimately fall in love with. This is a story about perseverance. This is a story about the emphasis of education. This is a story about kind of creating your own life and your own end goal. And I think that this is a really, really fantastic memoir. Then we have my idol. If you were to ask me who my idol is, I would give you an absolute sincere response in 2 seconds. Are you ready? I'm gonna take a drink. Who did you think it was? Let me know in the comments. Eleanor Roosevelt. Did you guess it? Was it in there? I don't know. I don't think I've ever given any clues. This is her autobiography. I have it sitting on my bedstand and I will reread it again. I loved it. And then, number 6, Only Plane in the Sky An Oral History of 9/11. I've talked about this quite a bit as well. This is a totally time-stamped history of 9/11, a telling of 9/11 exactly as it played out. From the beginning of that day to the end of it to week after. Top five. Theft by Finding by David Sedaris. I read quite a few of his books, and you're probably like, Anna, why don't you put them all on there? Well, they all are kind of the same. You know, it's all stories, and some of them are essays, so I just don't want to dig deep into what's fiction, what's reimagined. But this is 100% nonfiction. This is his stories. This is him just starting out. This is him figuring out what it means to try to be an artist, to try to use your God-given talent to make a success in life, and just the hilarity that he naturally is, and why I think he's such a great memoirist. It's inspiring for people who are just trying to figure themselves out, and it's funny. Those are two things I need: inspiring and funny. That's it. Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. For the longest time, I used to tell people that this was my favorite book of all time. This is my most reread book. I love this. It's true crime. It's all about the rising infrastructure of a city, and it's all about just the chaos of what the late 1800s were and where that industrial boom kind of took the United States. So fascinating, such great writing, such great investigative journalism. That's the word of the day. I love this book. I love it. Top 3. Are you ready? Are you ready to party? What I talk about when I talk about running by Haruki Murakami, number 3. This is a book that I think every single person should read. It's really not that long. It is inspiring. It's all about running, obviously. Murakami is an avid marathoner. He's run probably over like 30 at this point. Much more than the actual running. It's an allegory for anything that you want to achieve. And it's not necessarily a self-help book. It's just really positive and uplifting. And I don't care. I like that. I don't care. I think it's a great book. Number 2, and I've talked about this book a million times as well, Cockroaches by Scholastic Mukasanga. I don't think I'll ever read a memoir that was more absolutely unbelievable than this. This is all about Mukasanga's family and their surviving of the Rwandan genocide in the 90s. I've been wanting to learn much more about it, like kind of a first-hand account, and I encountered this book, and this was just one of the most moving things I've ever read in my entire life. Fantastic book. Number 1, because he is one of my favorite authors, and because ultimately I think when you read nonfiction, you want to be inspired, and you want to be moved. And Jon Krakauer does that for me, and I think that this is the easiest way to get into his writing, and that is Classic Krakauer by Jon Krakauer. And this was actually the first book that I read of his, and I've since read a lot of his catalog, all journalism pieces that he has kind of chosen and made into a compilation. I was so shocked by how much I enjoyed it, and I think that that is the sign of a good nonfiction read, when you are stepping into these boundaries that you don't think that you necessarily belong in, but you find yourself at home. And that's what does it. That is what does it. So there you go, guys. It is 10 o'clock at night. Honestly, as I'm looking at this list, I think I left a couple out, and I apologize. There's the majority of the nonfiction books that I've read, and I'm sure there'll be many more to come. I have a lot on my shelves, so this list will expand. Let me know, as always, what were some of the nonfiction books that you absolutely love, a nonfiction book that you're always sliding to your friends, you're saying, hey, listen, if you don't give it back, I won't be upset. You keep that copy, you know? As always, you're wonderful. You are fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you in the next one.